Okay, so we're going to call the meeting to order. I'd like to start the meeting by this meeting takes place in the traditional and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. So we'll move on to item 3, approval of the agenda. A recommendation that council approve the agenda for the May 28th, 2024 meeting as presented. Do I have a recommendation? Okay.
Sorry, just got a question on the agenda. The last meeting, the naturalization bylaw or proposal was put forward. It was meant to come back for this meeting. I don't see it on the agenda. I'm just wondering what's up with that.
It was a future meeting. I think it was originally the June 11th meeting it was scheduled for. And because Councillor Duggan and I are both going to be out of town, it'll probably be the June 25th meeting, I think.
Okay, no, just I think in the reading it said next for the next meeting, but that's fine.
Thank you. So there's been a mover by Councillor Mosier, a seconded by Councillor Halverson. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Approval of the minutes. There's a recommendation that council approve the May 14th, 2024 meeting minutes as presented. Is there a recommendation? Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Bertels. All those in favor? All those opposed? There are no presentations tonight, and there is actually nobody has signed down for the public input and question 20 minutes. So before we go to number 7, I'll just ask if anyone just walked by and forgot or whatever, but if you want to say something now you can. If not, we're going to move on to number 7. Okay, we'll move on to number 7. So that's just correspondence. We have some correspondence there. Just for correspondence. There's no public hearings, public information meetings and appeals tonight. And business arising and unfinished business. There's actually a recommendation under 9.1 under rodent control for demolition of buildings. There's a recommendation that council direct staff to draft regulations mandating pest control measures for all building demolitions within the town of Luneburg. Is someone prepared to move that? Okay. It's been moved by that side of the room and seconded by that side of the room. Okay, so gee, any discussion on the recommendation? Yeah, okay. Councillor Halverson.
I'll just throw it out. This came as a suggestion from a resident Anka Holm, and I just want to thank her for bringing that to council's attention. I think we're all on board with that. Thank you.
Yeah, it was the most positive response I've seen from the whole room to any email we ever received. So it was great. So all those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? Great. So 9.2 is repealing of policies decision. There's a recommendation that council repeal the following Town of Luneburg policies. They're all listed below. They're all in your package. And if you have any questions, first of all, is someone prepared to move the recommendation? Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Bertels. Now, if you have any questions of that, you can ask staff. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed. Now we're going to move on to new business. 10.1 is the fund withdrawal to purchase rescue boat and firefighting equipment. There's a recommendation in front of us that council approve a withdrawal from the Luneburg District Fire Department and Town of Luneburg Joint Equipment and Building Fund Bank account in the amount of $17,600 to fund the purchase of a small inshore rescue boat and wildland firefighting equipment. Is someone prepared to move that recommendation?
Can I just declare conflict? Just anything with the fire department, I'd just like to step out.
Okay, yeah, not a problem. Okay, so it's been moved by Councillor Halverson, seconded by Councillor Mosier. So any other questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed. So 10.2 is provincial funding applications. There's a couple recommendations, actually a bunch of recommendations here in front of us. And I'll read the first one off. It is that council directs staff to apply for funding from the beautification and streetscaping program for the 24-25 urban forest tree planting project. And there is a report in your package. So did you want to speak on that, or is anyone? Pardon? Kathleen will speak. Okay, excellent.
The beautification and streetscaping program, the BSP will invest in projects that improve appearances with a specific focus on attracting tourists and promoting tourism. Staff are recommending the Urban Forest Tree Planting Initiative for this funding application. Council have approved $40,000 for this initiative in the 24-25 town capital budget, and that was to be funded by $20,000 from deed transfer tax and hopefully from this grant in the amount of $20,000.
Moved by Councillor Mosier, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Any questions or comments? Councillor Sanford.
I'd just like to thank staff and appreciate having these laid out on the agenda because it helps us to see the focus of funding applications, which I think is very informative for everybody. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Halverson.
I just want to say, I think this is a great program. I'm just curious, what was the uptake last year? I think we had, how many trees planted and were they all allocated?
I think we planted somewhere in the vicinity of 20 trees. And this is year 3 that we're actually applying for. So we sometimes don't get our trees until later in the season. So in order for us to ensure that we're getting the ones that we're ordering in the ground, we don't order twice as many as we can handle. So we are applying yet again this year and hopefully we'll receive funding for the balance of the trees.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. Recommendation number 2 is that council direct staff to apply for funding from the Provincial Capital Assistance Program for 24-25 Water Main Loop, Harbor View to Morash project. That's actually, I think, up where my mom lives, so I'm going to have to declare a conflict. When you live in a small town, this gets difficult.
Thank you. Okay, you've heard the reading of the motion. Is there anybody who wishes to move that? Moved by Councillor Bertle, seconded by Councillor Sanford. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Contrary-minded, motion carried.
And then recommendation 3, that council direct staff to apply for funding from the Flood Risk Infrastructure Investment Program for the 24-25 Water Utilities Spillway Project. Is there anyone want to recommend that? Recommended by Councillor Mosier, seconded by Councillor Duggan. Is there any questions or do we have any information that is Tyson? Do you have the information on it, or who has the information? Kathleen? Okay, Kathleen.
So the Flood Risk Infrastructure Investment Program promotes investment in infrastructure needed to protect communities from flooding. The funding may also be used to create river training and floodway improvements. Staff are recommending that an application be submitted for the Water Utility Spillway Project. This project has a budget of $450,000 that has been approved in the 24-25 water utility capital budget and was to be funded from the depreciation reserve in the amount of $365,000. And we have received a PCAP grant for last year for this project as well in the amount of $85,000. So if we receive any funding from this grant, it will offset the depreciation reserve withdrawal.
Thank you, Kathleen. So there's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Oh, question, Councillor Halverson.
Yeah, just so we know, I mean, that is $450,000 that we're applying, less what we're applying for. Could we just get an explanation so people understand what it is we're spending that money on?
Through the chair. So this is out at Dares Lake, the dam and the spillway where we would draw water from. For a number of years, it's been recognised that improvements need to be made there. And this is the one that we talked about last year, where we had it in the capital budget and DFO told us we need the eel passage. So there's also some risk associated with that item. Our submission is into DFO for review right now, depending on the feedback we get from them. So the grant that we're applying for is an opportunity to maybe offset some of that as well, where we're committed in the budget with the depreciation funds and the existing grant we've got. So does that answer your question?
It does, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. So all those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. We'll move on to 10.3, Planning Advisory Committee Terms of Reference and Public Participation Policy, Notice of Policy. So there's two recommendations there for this. The first recommendation is that council approve the Planning Advisory Committee Terms of Reference as presented. Is there someone willing to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Duggan, seconded by Councillor Mosier. Any questions, discussion on it? Councillor Sanford.
I have a number, so I'm going to apologize in advance. First of all, I want to thank staff for bringing this forward and providing some clarification, because true to what was written in the documents, there was confusion at our last meeting. So this is very, very helpful. As I was going through it, I realized as chair of the committee, I can't say with confidence that I'm familiar with the new changes to the Municipal Government Act. So as a result of that, I'm kind of bumping my way along and questioning things. So if I get repetitive, please bear with me. To start with, do I understand from reading the documents that PAC is not required by the MGA? I guess this is through the chair to CAO. Keller.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay.
A municipality is not required to have a planning advisory committee, but as is explained in the memo, if a public advisory committee does exist, there has to be a public participation program to accompany it.
Thank you. So if I can go through this and ask some questions, I would really like that. So when I was reading the documents, the very first point that I wanted to make was the purpose and mandate. Can we add that it provides advice on planning matters? And the other is so this to me would be the first purpose and mandate is makes recommendations to council. So I didn't see that in that very first purpose and mandate. I just saw the providing advice on planning matters. So I felt that that first piece was missing. With regards to membership, I'm reflecting on our recent addition of new members. And I'm wondering, while members are to be replaced every 2 years, which I think is great, we need to replace people. You don't want people in place for excessive numbers of years. I'm just wondering, because we've had so many new people, how can we stagger it so we don't start with a whole new slate of members all at the same time? So I'm thinking, we might have new councillors and new community members all at once. So that's just a general question. In meeting administration, I'm reading and focusing in on the part that talks about not being live streamed or recorded. And I've just noted to myself, and I truly believe this, if we're committed to fostering transparent, inclusive, and effective public participation, I believe our PAC meetings and the public participation meetings should be live streamed and recorded. And they do in other jurisdictions. I don't know if they all do, but I know some that do. And I know that as somebody who's taken the time to watch some of the live streams or watch some of the recordings, it's very valuable. And again, it really speaks to that transparency and inclusive part of engagement. So I just wanted to make that comment, please. Number 4, was wondering, I had a question here with regards, so through the chair to Hillary, the language change is the public participation meeting language, the new language that replaces public information meeting? Like, we always use the term public information meeting, but I see in here it's the public participation meeting. Is that the same thing, or is it something different?
Through the chair, they are the same thing. We chose to use public participation meeting in this document because that's the term used in the MGA.
Okay.
But- but- They would function identical
Okay.
to what we have done.
Is there a way that we can flag that for the community? Because as a chair of the Planning Advisory Committee, it threw me off and I was confused. So the general public, I wouldn't anticipate that they would be clear on it without making that connection. So I'm wondering, which brings me along to another piece, I'm wondering if we need to look at what are the changes to, like in some kind of a table or something, just a quick reference about what the changes are. I noticed there are some that do appear side by side, which I found very helpful in the document. So I'll just leave that. I'll just put that out there. I have a question. I'm looking forward to hearing from my other council colleagues with regards to moving to fully online advertising. While I understand that it is financially in the best interest of an organization, it's more cost effective. I'm just asking, is this truly in the best interest to inform the residents for the town of Lunenburg? So I have a question about that. So I want to hear from my other council colleagues on that one. I have 3 more to go here. When we were looking at towards the end of the document about membership and committee seats and so on, should it state it if a certain number of meetings are missed by community members that their seat would be that they would forgo their seat? Just asking. And I did want to comment that I really liked the meeting frequency of bi-monthly. Currently, we've been working as needed. And at least if it is scheduled bi-monthly, and because I see a reference to more advising and engagement with planning staff on certain matters, that might be fill in those missed meetings with those bi-monthly meetings. And again, it helps the community to understand when they're scheduled. And then the last thing I want to add, and then I'm done. Thank you very much for your patience. With regards to the participation for attendees, I'm wondering if we could add, if an attendee behaves inappropriately, that the chair has the authority to request that they leave the public gallery, because I know we notice it's participation of the members of the committee, but also the community that engages with the committee. I think there needs to be some clarification on what the expectations are there as well. Those are my comments, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Councillor Halverson.
Well, thank you, Councillor Sanford. You knocked a bunch off my list for me. Thank you. I did have a couple more here. The biggest one for me, I agree with Councillor Sanford. The social media only is troublesome. My mother could have bulldozers show up her house and she would never know that they were coming. Doesn't check social media, not a clue. I still think we need some kind of physical presence, whether that's, I mean, I hesitate to say notices up at town hall because then it involves somebody getting up out of their house and physically coming here, but there must be some other way of notifying the public, especially those that are directly affected. I think to a couple of the other projects we've had around here, some of the paving things that are disruptive to people's driveways, the sidewalks and that kind of thing. Is it possible to, make it a condition if this is being tendered out, to make it a condition of the tender that the person responsible for the work goes out and notifies the homeowners that this work is happening? That should be one thing. But back to the, sorry, I'm actually getting off track here, but back to the PAC, we need to make sure in that vein that people are notified. So if there is a discussion coming up or some action that's going to pertain to a specific street, perhaps we could notify people, literally putting a paper in their door, something like that, physically. I don't know. Is that something that's possible to do? So.
I think after this discussion, this is all going to go back to staff for a bit. I don't think we'll be passing this tonight, so I think we'll be getting answers to all this by staff in another evening, I think. Okay.
I have and then So that was one of the big ones. The other big one I thought was really important was the accommodation section. And I was really troubled by this. What it reads in here. Please allow me a moment here to try and find it. Is it 6? Oh. 2, 5. There, 6. There. The accommodation, it's the third paragraph under accommodation, section 6 in the public engagement. Accommodation process requires all parties to work together in good faith. Applicants must submit written documentation from a medical practitioner outlining the restrictions and requirements without including sensitive diagnoses or health information. I don't think that affords our residents a level of dignity that they are due. I don't think we should be asking somebody, why do you feel you should be accommodated? I don't feel like we should be putting stress on our medical system and our doctors to provide a medical note for somebody who wants to come engage with their local government. So I'll leave that to the rest of the council to have that discussion as well. And then finally, this is more of a minor thing, but I do see in conduct below that staff, third paragraph again, staff reserve the right to withhold any written correspondence, audio recordings, or audio visual recordings deemed inappropriate or disrespectful. I think if it's going to be up to staff and outside the public purview, that something's going to be withheld, there needs to be criteria for why it's withheld, and there should be a rubric that it's adhered to, so that it can be justified why that's not being presented publicly. And that's all I have on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments? Okay, so we do have a recommendation, but based on what I've heard here tonight, I think we should probably put this back. Unless we want to vote on it tonight, but I'd probably suggested sending this back to staff to come back with some updated information, because there was a lot thrown out there in the last 10 minutes that I think it's unfair for staff to have to rewrite the bylaw now and for us to pass it. So how about can we just rescind the recommendation and move on at this point, Hillary?
Through the chair, the motion can simply die on the floor.
Just to be clear, then that motion will come back. You guys will take that away, and it'll come back in another meeting updated with what, well, the concerns we've brought forward addressed.
Through the chair, so normally this is a more extensive list of issues that have been raised, and none of those issues have been voted on by council. As such, what I would recommend is that staff review the minutes of the meeting diligently taken by the clerk. We can prepare a report with amendments and recommendations so you can see exactly what changes have been made between this version and the next version. Then should you want further amendments, you can give us that direction through a council motion. So many have been given tonight that I think that will be the simplest way to deal with it in the interim.
Okay, everyone good with that? I mean, we want to get this right. There's no sense rushing it, and there's a lot of great points brought up. So, okay, so we're going to move on to, we're not going to do recommendation 2, obviously. So we'll move on to 10.4, the Cultural Tourism Working Group Terms of Reference. There's a recommendation that council approve the Cultural Tourism Working Group Terms of Reference as presented. Someone want to recommend that? Moved by Councillor Mosier. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Bertels. Now, do we want Hillary to just tell us some more about it? A little update on it first, okay?
Good evening. So for the record, I'm interim CAO Hillary Grant. So on April 9th, 2024, Council directed staff to develop terms of reference for a cultural tourism working group tasked with completing a cultural tourism economic impact study and a sustainable cultural tourism plan. Cultural tourism is a type of tourism where the visitor's primary motivation is to learn, discover, experience, and consume the tangible and intangible cultural attractions and products offered by a tourist destination, in this case, of course, the town of Luneburg. It intersects with heritage sites, crafts, performing arts, gastronomy, festivals, and special events. This definition is based on the definition used by UNESCO. The cultural working group terms of reference were crafted based on guidance from the Strategic Tourism Expansion Program Manual, through which the town has received a grant to support the study and plan's completion. We began advertising for participants in the working group on May 8th. The working group will consist of tourism leaders. The Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency recommends that industry leadership is included in a working group to ensure the program's long-term success. In addition, staff are recommending that 2 members of the Lunenburg Board of Trade, 2 representatives of Lunenburg's nonprofit culture sector, 2 waterfront representatives, 2 community representatives, and 2 councillors serve on the working group. These terms of reference see the working group establishing an executive committee, including the working group chair, to facilitate progress and maintain communication with the consultants being hired to support the study and plan during the demanding tourism season. This is an ad hoc project-based working group with appointments ending when the work is complete, which staff anticipate will be summer 2026. As with all council-appointed committees and working groups, meetings will be open to the public.
Thank you. Are there any questions or concerns on the report in front of you? Councillor Halverson.
I just want to address, I had a meeting with a member of the arts community earlier this week, and then we had an email come through apparently. But independent of that, and they had expressed concerns that there didn't seem to be representation from the arts community in this group. A lot of it seemed to be focused on performing arts, tourism, that industry, that kind of thing, which is great. But we do have a thriving arts community as well, and I think there's a place, if we only have 2 seats for what was the term, cultural and nonprofit. Nonprofit and culture for profit. So I just feel like maybe we should expand the membership a little bit, or try and jig it so that we want to make sure we have as much representation as possible from as much of the sectors that are involved. I mean, all we have to do is walk up and down the street here to see the number of art galleries and things here that, people come to Luneburg, they come for the waterfront, they come for the Blue Nose, they come for the restaurants, and they come for the art. So I think we should have that represented as well.
Okay, so can we add people to this? I'll ask.
Through the chair, the number of seats was selected because staff felt that anything larger could quickly become unwieldy, especially again, given that this is supposed to be a working group, able to deliver a specific product within the timeline of the project scope and the RFP. So the composition could change, but I would not recommend adding more seats. I will add that staff have been attending the meetings of the Lunenburg Culture Collective for quite some time, and did receive their thoughts on the cultural tourism working group, the formation of the project as a whole, and the plan and study over the course of multiple meetings. Of course, drafts, the draft of the working group terms of reference were made publicly available with the agenda.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Sanford.
So I just wanted to add, reflecting on the development of the comprehensive community plan and thinking about what we learned for years of investment, not only financially, but with community representative and council work, to develop this great plan that we have. One of the things that we learned was the focus on actioning the plan. We didn't get there. We had a plan, but we weren't focused on actioning the plan. So I was looking at this particular plan in that context. And I'm thinking, okay, is it possible to add something to it that identifies actioning the plan? It's one thing to come up with a plan, but it's almost like, okay, so how do you move it? Or what's the plan to get it going? Or where does that start? So when I looked at the working group objectives, I'm wondering if under achievable cross-sectoral plan, that was one, and it notes develop. I'm wondering if we can, and these are just suggestions, I'm just throwing it out there, right? I'm wondering if we might consider adding action plan. So that not only have we a developed plan, but now we're moving it to action. The other thing that stayed with me is how many times in our council meetings have we talked about tourism is wonderful. And we're in a very fortunate position here in the town of Lunenburg. It does require commitment from town council and our budgets in the context of maintaining infrastructure, things like sidewalks. We talk about the state and condition of the sidewalks. We talk about if we increase our tourism and we sustain it over the long term and it's year round, garbage pickup or washrooms being open and accessible. So I think we as a town and as a council could benefit from understanding what are those necessary infrastructure pieces that need to be sustained along with this work. Okay, so I think we'd be remiss, and I think, if we're looking for value for our investment, I think as town council, that would be something that would benefit the town to understand how those infrastructure pieces play into this long-term sustainable tourism plan that we're creating. I'm wondering if under number 9, having said that, under investment and funding, is it, so it says to support cultural tourism projects, right? So to somebody's earlier point, there could be, as a part of this plan, people may come or do or get involved in project A or project B, but are those projects actually what the plan speaks to and necessitates to support the town going forward? Or are those projects kind of like those one-off pieces that while they achieve goals at the moment, they may not necessarily facilitate the long-term plan being sustainable and reaching the overall goals? So I'm wondering, could it say, instead of support cultural tourism projects, might it say action and evaluate the cultural tourism plan? So the actual plan itself gets put into action based on, and again, the plan is based on the great work that all of those contributing to it are creating. And then things will be carried out that are identified in the plan, whether or not they're projects. It could be washrooms being open longer in a year, right? And we evaluate that. Are we getting, value for dollar as a result of that? So those are just 2 suggestions that I have. One is looking at actioning the plan, and one is evaluating the plan to support also the town of Lunenburg's investment in the community and in this tourism plan going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or questions on the plan in front of us? I guess I have one comment where it says under the working group, it says 2 community representatives. I think it should say 2 town of Luneburg residents or property owners of the town of Luneburg. That would alleviate a lot of the discussion we've been having lately on certain issues. So if it's in the guidelines, they have to actually live in town or own property in the town to serve on the committee. So I think that way it eliminates the debate we've had in the past. So that would be my suggestion. I guess Do we need to make any motions on these changes, or can we send these changes back to you once again? And
Through the chair, since these are relatively few, two currently, three, Councillor Halverson, his recommendation to change the composition of the membership and/or increase the numbers has been discussed. Changing the language from community representatives to Town of Luneburg residents have been discussed. Councillor Sanford has suggested adding language around actioning and evaluating to support the Town of Luneburg's investment in the community and tourism plan. I would want to do some research into this last recommendation because, for example, I'd want to evaluate how much actioning a working group could be tasked to take. For example, if we are to have representatives from the Lunenburg Board of Trade, from the private arts sector, we can't necessarily council can't necessarily commit that or create a framework where those volunteering will be mandated to action something depending on what said action is. So again, I'd want to take some time to research that language to see what could and could not be done.
Councillor Halverson?
Thanks. That was just a question I had. I'm not actually looking for an action. I think when I look at this now, if we can have two representatives from the non-profit culture sector, and we can identify, someone from arts and someone from performance or something that might satisfy what we're looking for. Maybe we can put that stipulation there or something, but maybe I can leave that up to staff as well. So I don't need that as a recommendation.
Councillor Duggan?
I agree with what Councillor Halverson is saying, just in terms of when I look at this list, I mean, it leaves a lot of room for applications from people in the arts sector. So where it says 2 from public or nonprofit culture and 2 community, I mean, anybody really within that realm can apply for that. So that's up to them to step forward and put their names in if they would like to be included in that group. I don't see a reason to change the composition, so.
Okay, so are we gonna bring this back because you want to look into that third request?
Through the chair, perhaps a motion regarding changing the language of community representatives to Lunenburg residents, and perhaps a motion asking us to do some research, asking staff to do some research into incorporating, actioning, and evaluating into the terms of reference. Those seem to be the 2 issues still on the floor.
Would someone like to make those motions? I can't make the motions I recommended.
I'll make the motions as recommended that were.
The motion would read, for example, direct staff to replace community representatives with Town of Luneburg residents under the working group composition. And the second motion would be direct staff to research and bring back a report at a future council meeting on adding, actioning, and evaluating into the cultural tourism working groups objectives.
Okay, I'll move the first motion. Are we making that one motion?
Through the chair, I recommend that those be 2 separate motions for the sake of clarity.
So Councillor Halverson moved the first motion. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Deputy Mayor. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. Now for the second motion, I'm going to get Hillary to read it out one more time so we know exactly what we're voting on, okay?
The motion would be direct staff to bring forward at a future council meeting a report researching, adding, actioning, and evaluating to the cultural tourism working group's objectives.
Is Councillor Sanford moving that? Who's seconding it? Councillor Bertels. Any discussion on that? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. Okay, so now we're going to move on to 10.5. So on 10.5, there's a recommendation there, and what I'll do is I'll get staff to explain to us what the recommendation is about, and then we'll move forward.
Through the chair, again, I'm interim CAO Hillary Grant. Under the Accessibility Act, municipalities are required to have an accessibility advisory committee, develop an accessibility plan, and engage the public, including persons with disabilities, when developing or revising their accessibility plan. The Inter-Municipal Accessibility Agreement brings together the Town of Luneburg, the municipality of the District of Lunenburg, and the municipality of the District of Chester, as well as the town of Bridgewater and the town of Mahone Bay, to collectively enhance the accessibility of our municipal services and facilities. This partnership, coordinated by Ellen Johnson, will cost the town of Lunenburg $12,744 for the fiscal year 2024-2025. Since 2019, the town of Luneburg has been an active member of the Lunenburg County Accessibility Advisory Committee. In the 2020-2021 fiscal year, the committee developed our initial accessibility plan. As mandated by the Accessibility Act, we are required to update this plan every 3 years, making 2024-2025 the year for a new plan. The committee will lead this effort, facilitate public consultation, and monitor directives from both federal and provincial governments to ensure they are properly incorporated into the joint accessibility plan. Our accessibility coordinator, Ellen Johnson, provides invaluable expertise on accessibility matters, ensuring that our municipal administrators are well informed of their responsibilities. We hold regular meetings, at least quarterly, between the accessibility coordinator and the chief administrative officer. These meetings review the previous quarter's service delivery and strategize for the upcoming quarter to meet our accessibility goals. This year, our cost under the agreement has increased from $11,456 to $12,744. This increase is largely due to the higher costs of public engagement and advertising as we draft our new accessibility plan. Each municipality's contribution is based on its uniform assessment and the use of the accessibility coordinator's time. For the town of Luneburg, this means our uniform assessment constitutes 5.24% of the total assessment across all signatories, and we will have 10% of the accessibility coordinator's hours dedicated to supporting our specific accessibility initiatives or other cases on which the CAO feels that the accessibility coordinator should contribute. Additionally, 20% of the coordinator's hours will be allocated to joint initiatives, such as administering the committee. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. And I'd just like to add that the intermunicipal group of all the mayors and wardens and deputy mayors and deputy wardens and CAOs that have been meeting, I think every 2 months they meet, or every 3 months. This was very high on their agenda, so I'm glad to see it's finally coming to fruition, because it's been talked about before I was actually sitting in this chair. So I'm glad to see it's finally happening. So we need a recommendation on the motion right now that council ratify the intermunicipal accessibility agreement and the 2024-25 intermunicipal accessibility agreement annual budget as presented. So I need that moved by Councillor Halverson, seconded Councillor Sanford. Any discussion? Councillor Halverson.
Thanks. I just want to say I really believe in what this committee is doing. I think the making government accessible to all is fundamental to our democracy. So, but that being said, I'm just wondering, you mentioned 24-25, we'll see our next set of recommendations coming forward. Similar to the South Shore Open Doors Association, is it possible to, at regular intervals, perhaps have some kind of update to see what progress we're making? Because, accessibility, it doesn't just have to be, building out staircases and changing out ramps and all those things. It can be really small, minute things. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit that I'm sure has been brought to our attention. Is it possible to have perhaps updates on if any of those actions are taking place, how frequently, maybe just on, and then on the progress of the committee? If we could have this presented at the council at regular interviews, I don't know, every quarterly or something, if that would make sense. I think that would be helpful for me and for council going forward, just to understand the work that's being done, why it's important and how it impacts the citizens and the town.
Through the chair, yes, that is absolutely a possibility. Should council be interested in pursuing that, I would recommend quarterly an update from the accessibility coordinator to again complement the rhythm of meetings that are already being held between us and the committee. I would recommend that if council is interested in pursuing receiving quarterly updates, that be made through a notice of motion.
Okay, any other, go ahead, Councillor Sanford.
So I represent council on the accessibility committee, and I'm going to say, and don't hold me to this, I'm thinking maybe a month ago, the committee itself determined that Ellen would be submitting reports to the various councils for exactly the reasons Councillor Halverson is indicating, so that folks are aware of what we're doing, progress we're making, where we're at, and what's coming next. So those, I think there was one in our package, I'm going to say a month back, maybe 6 weeks back. Anyhow, so that's going to be a regular occurrence.
Perhaps to the chair, if perhaps in the interim, if until those happen, as you're the representative on the committee, would you be comfortable presenting those findings, whatever report that is forwarded to you, to council?
I'm happy to present Ellen's report, share it with council, speak to it.
Thank you. So everybody's happy? All good? Ready to vote on the recommendation? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. Okay, so now we're going to move on to community grants. There's a few there, so we're going to start with Kelly to do one at a time because we're going to have to make individual motions. So Kelly, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. For the record, I am Kelly Cunningham, the Recreation Manager with the town. The Town of Luneburg accepts applications for the Community Grants Program annually with a deadline of March 31st. On May 14th, 2024, Council approved awarding $42,000 in grants to organizations under the 2024-25 operational budget. The town's Community Grants Program received 33 applications with a total funding request of $73,160 for fiscal 24-25. Grants last year totaled $33,180 with 20 applications. Given ongoing work to update the town's Community Grants Program, the number of applications and amount requested this year, staff are seeking directions on how council wishes to evaluate and distribute the funds. The $42,000 budget amount includes a $4,000 grant for the Brighter Days campaign or capital campaign for the South Shore Regional Hospital, which is already committed, and $8,000 allocated to in-kind services under the special events policy that is also already committed. Council discussed on May 14th awarding $10,000 to Lunenburg County Wheels and $834 to the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 23. At the September 26, 2023 council meeting, the following council motion was requested. Amend the Community Grants Program policy to add criteria for Lunenburg students needing extra funds for provincial or national recreational or cultural activities, allocating $2,000 from the Community Grants Fund exclusively for qualifying student applicants. Presuming that council wishes to proceed with these grants, $17,166 remains to be allocated based on the applications received. The report outlines 4 different options that staff could use to distribute this year's grants. Option 1, equal percentage. All applicants that qualify under the town's current community grants policy are granted the same percentage of their requested amount. This option would see each organization slightly less than 1/3, which would be 29.7% of their requested amount. Option 2, equal amount. All applicants that qualify under the policy are approved an equal funding amount or 100% of their grant request, whichever is less. This would see 4 groups who have requested $572 or less receive the full amount requested, and all other applicants receive $613. Option 3, following precedent. All previously supported applicants from 23-24 received the same amount as what they were approved in 23-24, or 100% of the grant requested, whichever is less. New organizations are provided an equal funding amount or 100% of their request, whichever is less. Option number 3 was used to evaluate the 23-24 applications. This would see 14 organizations receive the same amount as last year, between 100 and 3,500, and the other 16 organizations receive 130. And option 4, merit-based analysis. Evaluate all qualifying applicants based on criteria, including direct impact to the Town of Luneburg community, funding to support diversity, inclusion, and accessibility initiatives and programs, and applicants' financial need. An internal committee of 4 staff members would evaluate submissions using a grading rubric and allocate funds based on the scores received. The staff report found in the agenda package provides further description of each option, including the pros and cons, and attachments with the breakdowns of options number 1, 2, and 3 for each applicant. The rubric for option 4 is also found in the attachments. If council wishes for me to go through each detail in further detail, I'll be happy to do so. And there are 3 recommendations for council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? What we'll do is we'll do the first recommendation first, and we'll discuss that and go down through them, because I think there's 3 here or 4. So recommendation 1 is that council award a $10,000 community grant to Lunenburg County Wheels. Is anyone prepared to make that motion? Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Any discussion on that? Councillor Moser.
Thank you, Worship. Well, my question, 2 questions of that. This came after our budget was approved, if I'm not mistaken. So what impact has that done to our granting budget? I guess that would be my first question. And then secondly, you know, if where is that additional money coming from?
That $10,000 was actually approved as part of your operating budget. It just wasn't clearly definitive that it was for that program. It was to be part of the grants to organizations, but it wasn't clearly definitive at that time that it was to go to this organization. And but it was intended, I believe, at that motion that was what was to happen.
Yeah, we made a motion that night because I think everyone thought it was a good idea, but then we didn't have the money. So we made a motion to increase the budget by 10 grand, if I remember correctly, and it was moved. So there was no motion made to distinctly go to them, but that's why the budget was increased at the time.
So if I understand correctly, then the budget was increased by $10,000, and that $10,000 came out of operating. And what do you see, you know, I guess, what do you see being affected in operating for that $10,000?
Through the chair, that money was allocated through recalculating our deed transfer tax. Council felt that the calculation was low on what we could anticipate receiving from the deed transfer tax. So that was increased by 10,000, and 10,000 was allocated to the community grants program.
Thank you. Any other questions on the recommendation? There's a motion on the floor. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? Motion carried with a 5-2 vote. Councilors Moser and Duggan voting in the negative, for the record. Okay. Now we'll move on to recommendation number 2, that council award $834 community grant to the Lunenburg Royal Canadian Legion branch number 23. Is there someone prepared to make that motion? Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Bertels. Any discussion on that? Councillor Sanford.
I'm looking for clarification because goodness, I've been giving a lot of thought. To this since we discussed this at our last council meeting. And I'm really concerned that if funds are given currently to the Legion that then prevent them from having funds for the Remembrance Day parade, like I'm thinking there's not, if I understand correctly, there's not enough funding to cover both events, the Battle of the Atlantic and the Remembrance Day parade.
Through the chair, this $834 would be in addition to the money that is already allocated and deemed pre-approved under the special events policy.
So then they would get their Remembrance Day.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Excellent. Any other questions or concerns? Councillor Moser.
Well, I guess like, I have no issue with this and then number three, if we would, just for an example, take the merit-based award system for the rest of the grants, I mean, we could, recover that money easily, right? I would sooner give it to the Legion than the Lunenburg Yacht Club, for example.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? It was the recommendation that was read as written. Yep, that was okay. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. Now move on to recommendation 3, that council award 24-25 community grants following one of the 4 options below. Is someone prepared to make a recommendation choosing one of those 4? Councillor Duggan.
I would like to move that council award the 2024-2025 community grants following option 4, the merit-based analysis.
It's been moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Sanford. Any discussion on that motion? Councillor Sanford.
I would like to add in the criteria for the screening criteria that staff seek to find balance between sport and recreation, health, education, and arts and culture. I find when I look at those, sometimes it gets very heavily weighted into the sport and recreation. And I'd like to see more balance in the, but also very much like the option 4.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan.
And I would just like to say that I know that this was included in here, but I would like to see prioritization to local Town of Luneburg community groups that serve our community directly. There are a lot of different funding applications on there, and there are a number of them that are here in town. So I would like to see that prioritized.
And one thing I'd like to add is I'd like to see him take priority on youth requests. I always use the example, if a youth hockey team wants to go away for the weekend, I have no problem fundraising for them. If 15 guys want to go away for a weekend for a hockey tournament, they should pay their own way. And I think that that's how it should be weighted. So I'd like that looked at as well. Councillor Halverson.
We're all putting a lot of requests into here right now. I think, if we're doing a merit-based system, let's let the merits work itself out, and then it's going to come back to us to vote on anyway. Correct? So then, if we want to interject at that point, I think we should just let staff do what they need to do, and then we'll have our opinion when it's time to sign the check. Okay.
I was just impressed. We all read our packages this month. I can tell you the way it's going.
I read my package every month.
Yeah, it's quite impressive. Well, everyone did their homework this week. So all those in favor of the recommendation, raise your right hand. All those opposed. Okay, thank you very much. Now we move on to number 11, notice of motions. The first one is 11.1. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, as I said at the last meeting, I would like to just, as the motion reads, that council directs staff to explore the creation of a municipal archive and ensure that documents currently stored in vulnerable areas are moved to more secure locations. As I said last meeting, the documents in question would be pieces that are not useful to the town's everyday maintenance and running, of course. Yeah, that's really all that there is to add. Thank you. And I'd be happy to move that to motion.
It's been moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Sanford. All those in favor? Or Councillor Howard?
That wasn't me. It's all right. We're having a great time with you here tonight, Trevor. Keep us on our toes. I just would like a little bit more clarification on the motion. Are you looking for staff to find a physical storage place? Are we looking for a place to display? Are we looking for interpretive panels on? What is it we're actually looking for here?
Thank you. At this time, all I'd like to see is the vulnerable items removed to a secure and safe location. I have been through this building and I can say there's some items throughout the basement, in the attic, that are not in the most ideal circumstances considering the the nature of the pieces. So at this point, I would just like to see them removed to somewhere where they can be safely stored, and then we can also take an opportunity to just determine the next steps for conservation.
So we'd be looking at performing an inventory and then moving them safely to some
Yeah.
safe storage.
Yeah,
Okay.
obviously, in a perfect world and on a wish list, I'd love to see a large interpretive center where we could, have these available to people to look through, and yeah, interpretation and telling the story of the community would be paramount. But that's a little ways down the road at this point. We just want to get these secure at this moment.
Okay, any other discussion on that motion? Councillor Duggan?
So in this, I would assume, but I don't want to, that we would do a cost analysis for what this would look like as far as staff time, a location, all of that stuff. Is that correct?
Through the chair, in preparation for tonight's meeting, I did do some very preliminary looking into this, anticipating this question. The Town of Luneburg is currently advertising for some summer student positions, and we feel that those positions would be well suited to support some of these activities. The town owns a significant amount of property, multiple buildings. So we're confident that we can certainly find a more secure location for some of these items than that in which they currently find themselves. For example, moving a sensitive document from the 1800s or early 1900s from a basement that is prone to flooding to a room where they're less likely to be subject to water damage.
Thank you. Any other questions? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed. Okay, now the next three draft motions were my suggestions. So notice of motions, I can't make draft motions. So does someone want to move the first one, or because I'm not allowed to make a motion? Moved by Councillor Mosier. Is there a seconder? Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Duggan. Yeah, second by Councillor Duggan. Let's go ahead. Questions?
I'm just, again, I'm just trying to understand what is it we're trying to capture here with this motion?
So we can get like a list, almost like a just a list of a to-do list of what our next steps are with Blockhouse Hill. We've already chosen number 2, option 2. So do we have to now get development rules in place? Do we have to call special meetings? Do we have to call public meetings? So when people ask us, we know what the answer is and we know how to answer the questions properly, rather than every time someone asks us a question about Blockhouse Hill, we have to go back to staff, or we're all telling them something different. So really a staff report on it, so we all are on the same page, really.
I guess my next question, I guess, would be through to our interim CIO. What kind of time, how much time is this going to take to get this done? Is this going to pull a lot of staff time to pull this together? Or is this something that, you kind of already know in the back of your head and you can just scratch down and present to council next meeting?
Through the chair, I lean towards the latter.
Okay, so that's really was this. So there's a motion made, moved to second. Any other questions? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. So the next one was from me as well. I can't make that motion either. So if someone wants to make the motion, fine. Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Mosier. Any questions? Comments? Councillor Mosier.
Well, I would be interested to see how how we would conduct this through a plebiscite. So that's the reason I would, I would support this motion at the time.
That's the main reason I made it, because people have been asking me and I have no idea. Exactly, yeah. So it's been moved and seconded. Any other questions? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? Motion carried 5-2 with Councillor Sanford and Councillor Duggan voting in the negative. And then the last one was by me as well, just to be ready for next year's budget. Moved by Councillor Mosher, or seconder. Second by Councillor Sanford. Any discussion on that? Councillor Halverson.
Again, just looking for some clarification. Are we talking about, tap meters or something that the hotspot parking kind of thing you can pay through your phone? Is that what you're looking at, installing those kind of meters, or you're looking at a parking structure?
No, I'm looking at the meters that we have. If we're going to have them enforced the way they're being enforced, I think we have to get caught up with the times sooner rather than later, because not everyone drives around with a piggy bank between the seats of their car and loonies and toonies. So either a tap system, whatever, that's up to staff. They have basically 8 months to come back to us with some suggestions on what the cost would be, what our meters are now making, because now that they're being enforced on a regular basis, we're going to have more of a handle on what the revenue will be like with meters and with tickets. So it's just something that get more with the times. In Bridgewater, you can use and at Halifax, a lot of communities do. So I just thought we should try to get more with the times, because I'm running out of loonies and toonies at the store, giving people change when they park in front of the store. So
I just, I think what I'm balking at here is just that it looks like it's a directive right now for us to include this in the budget next year, when none of us are, or some of us, or who knows, like there's gonna be a new council there, so that could just get overturned. I think it might be better to ask for a report, as you're talking about here, instead of to include it in the budget. I think having the report on hand so we know what we're looking for, and then that could be forwarded on to the next council, might be more prudent.
I figure they're not going to come back with the report until next council. I figure you might not see this report until next budget anyway. So it says in there for consideration in the 25-26 budgets. That was really all that I was looking for. I'm not saying that the new council is going to approve it or not. So
yeah, I think I'd be more comfortable if we asked for a report as opposed to just the way it's written here. I'll look to our interim CAO if she's fine with the verbiage here, that it makes sense and accomplishes what you're trying to get to, then that's fine. But I feel like a report would be a bit more appropriate.
Through the chair, should council so wish, the motion could read to the effect of that council direct staff to prepare a report towards including paid parking infrastructure, which accepts various forms of payment for consideration in conjunction with the 2025-2026 budget. Therefore, staff would have the direction to ensure that this is brought forward in time and to align with budget considerations next year.
fine with me. It's just to get the numbers so we know what we're talking about.
Okay, if that captures what you're trying to get to, I'm satisfied with that, and I'm happy to move that motion.
Yeah. You amended that?
You would need a motion to amend the motion that's already been moved and seconded.
So Councillor Halverson is making a motion to amend the motion. Yes. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Is there a seconder, Councillor Mosher? So now we're voting on the amended motion. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, motion carried. Now we need a motion to move in camera. Moved by Councillor Duggan, seconded Councillor Sanford. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming out in this lovely evening and attending, and have safe travels home. Thank you.